This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're kicking things off with a pretty massive historical claim.
It's a big one.
The idea that the world we live in, politically, scientifically, all of it, was fundamentally shaped not by battles or trade, but by a huge philosophical argument in the 12th century.
And all centered on one man, Aristotle.
Exactly. Our sources for this deep dive map out this incredible fork in the road. We're calling it the geopolitics of thought.
Right.
We're going to look at how the destinies of two giant civilizations, the Islamic world and Europe, really hinged on how they each decided to handle Aristotle's ideas.
And this isn't just, some dusty academic exercise. We are literally tracing a chain of decisions starting way back in the 11th century.
A chain that explains why the West developed modern science, why it developed this kind of systematic political idealism.
Leading right up to someone like Karl Marx, yeah. And on the other side, why the Islamic world, which was for centuries the absolute pinnacle of intellectual life, deliberately chose to close that door.
So our mission today is to find that precise point where they split. It all seems to start with this fundamental tension, right, between faith and reason.
That's the core of it. And you have to understand, the starting line was exactly the same for both. Medieval Europe and the Islamic world, they both get their hands on Aristotle's metaphysics.
His deep thinking on what? Being, cause, truth, all the big questions.
All of it. And they both immediately ask the same theological question. Does this kind of philosophy make God less free, less all-powerful?
Because if the universe runs on these rigid, rational laws, it kind of limits what a divine being can do, right?
Precisely. The fear was the same. The difference, and really this is the entire story we're telling today, is in the answer each civilization gave to that question.
Okay, so let's get into that initial split. We're in the 11th century. The same Greek texts are creating three totally different reactions.
Radically different.
First up, from the Islamic world, we have Avicenna, or Ibn Sina. He's the great pragmatist.
He is. For Avicenna, Aristotle's metaphysics wasn't a threat to God at all.
No, it was a practical tool.
A practical tool, that's the perfect phrase. He basically saw Aristotle as the knowledge infrastructure for running a complex empire. It wasn't just for abstract debate.
He used it for medicine, for bureaucracy.
For law, for science. His whole system was about explaining how things work in an orderly, predictable way. You can see why the sources call him a kind of proto-positivist. He believed that a rational, systematic view of reality was the key to good governance and, generating knowledge.
And of course, that kind of power, that administrative rationalism, it immediately creates a backlash.
A furious backlash. Enter Al-Ghazali.
Right.
For Ghazali, what Avicenna was doing was a colossal danger. He saw this systematic rationalism as a theological enemy.
An alien substance.
Exactly. Something that threatened to put human reason above God's will. I mean, if the universe only works according to these rigid Aristotelian rules, where's God's freedom to just intervene? To perform a miracle?
So he attacks it. He goes on the offensive to protect the authority of theology.
Relentless.
So you have Avicenna, the systems guy, and Ghazali, the defender of the faith. And then across the Mediterranean, you get the third response with Thomas Aquinas.
Aquinas is looking at the exact same problem, the same texts, but he sees metaphysics as a theological apparatus.
So he's not throwing it out like Ghazali.
Not at all. And he's not just using it for state building like Avicenna. He's doing something else entirely. He's taking Aristotle's concepts, things like the idea of a first cause.
The chain of causality.
Right. And he integrates them directly into Christian doctrine. He essentially uses Aristotle's logic to make theology stronger, to turn it from just a set of beliefs into a intellectually defensible system.
So he's the mediator, trying to get the rational power of Avicenna without sacrificing the theological safety that Ghazali was so worried about.
And this is where our sources introduce this really powerful metaphor to explain what happens next. They talk about it as a kind of civilizational surgery.
Okay.
In the Islamic world, they perform what you could call a successful excision.
They cut it out.
They cut it out completely. Ghazali's ideas, backed by powerful states like the Almohad Caliphate, they won. They successfully removed Avicenna's Aristotelian rationalism, branding it a dangerous heresy.
And the sources say the surgery was successful. So in the short term, it worked. It preserved religious order, social stability.
It did. But here's the devastating side effect. The entire project of institutionalizing reason, of building universities and bureaucracies based on this rational framework, it just stopped. It came to a dead halt.
So they removed the disease, but they also removed the organ that allows a civilization to self-update.
That's it. The engine for generating new systems of knowledge was just gone.
Wait, so you're saying Europe became modern because its surgery failed?
Exactly. Europe attempted the same procedure, but it was a failed excision. They had the same initial fears as Ghazali. But the thing is, people like Aquinas had already woven Aristotle too deeply into the fabric of the church itself.
They had made it a weapon for theology.
Right. They'd essentially integrated the lesion, as the source calls it, right into the body. And because they failed to cut it out, that rational core was institutionalized. It led directly to the medieval university system, to natural philosophy, and eventually to the scientific revolution.
The seeds were planted and protected inside the very structure they were supposed to threaten.
Precisely.
Now, here's a point the sources make that seems just tragic. Ghazali's original critique was actually very specific.
Incredibly nuanced, yeah.
He wasn't against all of Aristotle. He only wanted to attack the metaphysics, the abstract stuff about the soul, the cosmos, ultimate reality.
He was actually fine with what we'd call natural science. He saw the value of Aristotelian logic, physics, math for practical things.
But the political powers, the ones who actually carried out the surgery, they didn't get that distinction.
Or they just didn't care. It was simpler to just ban it all. They excluded all of Aristotle's work in this big sweep to protect religious authority.
But they threw out the baby, the bathwater, the whole tub. And in doing so, they killed the potential for what could have been the Islamic Descartes.
Think about it. If they had just kept the natural science, the physics, the optics, all the work of thinkers like Averroes or Ibn al-Haytham, the Islamic world might have developed this amazing specialization.
Religion for the soul, science for practice.
Exactly. And that one administrative mistake, that failure to draw a clear line, it basically killed the modern age that was on the verge of being born there.
Okay, so let's follow that other thread. Reason survives in Europe. It's integrated. How does that Avicenna lineage, that drive for rational order, lead to the world we know now, specifically in politics?
Well, that lineage, that way of thinking, it doesn't just die out. After Averroes in Spain, it kind of goes underground and then pops up again with Descartes, and maybe most powerfully with Thomas Hobbes.
Hobbes, Leviathan.
Yes. Hobbes is the perfected Western modern version of Avicenna's system. He takes that core idea of explaining reality through rigid, predictable, mechanical rules.
And applies it to the state.
Ruthlessly. The state, for Hobbes, is the Leviathan, a giant artificial body. It's like a giant machine, a clock. Every person is a cog, the sovereign is the main gear, and it all runs on rational, almost mathematical principles to ensure order.
And where does religion fit into this perfect machine?
It's just a tool, a useful device that the state uses to keep the cogs in line, to maintain social harmony. It's the ultimate expression of administrative rationalism.
Now, the sources make this really interesting argument about the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
That it actually and kind of accidentally sped all of this up.
It's a huge paradox. The Reformation comes from that Ghazali-like spirit, right? It's about individual conscience against big institutional authority.
Right.
But to fight their battles against the Catholic Church, the Protestants needed an ally. So they championed individual literacy, direct observation, and they picked up science, astronomy, physics as their casting vote.
They use science as this neutral, rational weapon against tradition.
Exactly. But here's the unintended consequence. The source calls it a silent coup.
A silent coup.
Yeah. Science, which they brought in as an ally, just quietly took over. It became the ultimate way of explaining the world. Once Newton can describe the entire cosmos with a few mathematical laws, the need for a theological explanation starts to shrink.
Which then provokes this huge philosophical counterattack.
German idealism. This is Kant. This is Hegel. They pop up right in the heart of the Protestant world, and their entire project is this massive attempt to take the center of the world back from scientific materialism.
They can't accept that the universe is just this big dumb machine.
No way. So Hegel builds this incredible all-encompassing system of the absolute spirit. He argues that it's thought, consciousness, the mind that's actually driving history, nature, all of reality. It's the ultimate attempt to put spirit and reason back on the throne.
This whole chain of events is just incredible. But it brings us back to that core question. Why? Why did Europe fail to suppress reason when the Islamic world succeeded?
Right. The church tried, right. The condemnations of 1277 tried to shut down Aristotle, but it always bounced back.
So what was the secret ingredient in Europe?
According to our sources, the black box, the ultimate cause, is Europe's deep cultural DNA. It's Platonic idealism.
Plato.
From Plato, European culture inherited this upward striding mechanism. It's the deep-seated belief that the ideal, the universal, the perfect rational truth is always better than messy, flawed, real-world reality.
And that impulse was just too strong to contain.
It was too strong. Every time an institution tried to put reason back in its box, that Platonic urge to find the perfect, ideal truth just broke out again.
And this had two massive world-changing consequences.
The first one, violent science. When you mix that Platonic upward drive with Christian doctrine, you get a modern science with a unique aggressiveness.
Aggressiveness.
Yeah, because the ideal is superior, you don't just observe nature. You have to dominate it. You have to control it, master it, bend it to your rational will. The source uses strong language here, like the urge to conquer or even rape nature.
Which is so different from the kind of science that might have developed in the Islamic world.
Totally different. That would have been a more gentle, stable, technical civilization, more like China, maybe, focusing on observation, adaptation, useful inventions, but without that relentless, violent drive for total domination.
Okay, so that's consequence one. What's the second?
The second is the recurring theme of the Philosopher King. That same Platonic idealism explains why Europe constantly produces these abstract, top-down, idealized political systems.
Because the perfect rational idea for society is always seen as better than the messy one we actually have.
Exactly. It creates a constant revolutionary urge to tear down the old, flawed reality and rebuild society based on a purely rational, abstract blueprint.
And this brings us all the way to Marx.
This brings us to Marx. The source argues that Marxism is the latest and most powerful version of this Platonic political tradition.
How so?
Well, you have an elite, the vanguard party acting as the modern philosopher king. They claim to understand the true laws of history, the rational, inevitable path to an ideal state.
And so they have the right, even the duty, to guide the ignorant masses toward that perfect rational society.
It is a Republic of Plato, just dressed up in 19th century economics.
So let's try and tie this all together for you listening. We started with a choice made centuries ago about Aristotle.
A simple choice.
Islam chose stability. It successfully removed the philosophical lesion, but in doing so, it sacrificed its engine for self-renewal, for rational science.
While Europe tried to do the same thing and failed. And that failure, driven by its deep Platonic programming, led to everything we recognize as modern. Systematic rationalism, aggressive science, and this constant, often violent, cycle of idealistic politics, from Hobbes to Hegel to Marx.
It's an incredible story of unintended consequences. The path of stability led to a kind of stagnation.
And the path of conflict and internal contradiction led to global dominance.
Which leaves us with a final, really provocative thought for you to take away.
If you think about it, Islam traded future innovation for immediate stability. Europe achieved its power by embracing a form of violent rationality. So the question is, if the ultimate goal of a civilization is long-term sustainability, internal harmony, was Europe's failed surgery, with all its conflict and conquest, really a greater success in the long run than Ghazali's successful one?
It all depends on what you value more, stability or perpetual aggressive change.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.